the onboarding in most organizations only begins on day one.
Yeah.
And we really need to start catering to that pre-onboarding phase. There has to be things that become memorable. So again, just giving them a water bottle on day one, we think that's cool. We gave them a t-shirt, I put a balloon on their desk. I'm not saying don't do that, but you really need to think what's going to get them to finish their day and go home and say, oh my God, that was really great,
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Recruiting Revolution. Our guest today is Brigitte Skeen from Montreal, Canada. Bridget is the co-founder of Talent IQ and Engagés. The organizations are committed to amplifying the human talent. Bridget has over 25 years of experience in talent acquisition. Her career spanned both domestic and international roles in major companies in leading human capital consulting firms. Welcome, Bridget, and thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Nice to meet you, Nidhi. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Bridget, to kick things off, could you just share your amazing journey with us?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I've been in talent acquisition for 25 years. I actually started my career in corporate recruiting, working for large aerospace organizations. And I sort of followed my mentors along. I was very lucky and privileged to have people who were great leaders throughout my career. That's actually something that I want to pay forward, and I have been paying forward, now being a leader also in TA. And I would say at some point, midpoint in my career, I was seeing the evolution of talent acquisition becoming more complex, having more technology embedded in our way of doing things, and this emergence of the RPO model, so recruitment process outsourcing. And if I wanted to continue to progress my skills and grow in the field, I think it was at that time I decided it was time to make the switch into a consulting role. And so that's what I did. And then so the last part of my career was really working, like you said, with global organizations, helping them, I would say, transform and modernize their talent acquisition function, building solid teams, embedding the right technology, going from a transactional approach to a more experiential approach. And as you mentioned, I've launched Talent IQ in the last 3 years and have my team now doing things a little differently, I would say.
That is amazing. So, now you are an entrepreneur. So, was there a inspiration behind, your venture Talent IQ?
Well, it's an interesting story, actually, because I actually launched this business with a customer of mine. So this happened right when COVID hit. And I had quit my job to be at home with the kids. And as things were starting to pick up again, interviewing with potential employers, and there was always a red flag. There was always something that was telling me I didn't feel aligned to the purpose, or I didn't feel that they were truly delivering on their promises. And I think a lot of people were feeling the same way during this time, re-questioning, right? The whole meaning behind what we do, right? Instead of just going to work every day and being more on this routine, but what am I contributing to? So I was in that same boat. And when I couldn't find a place where I could feel that full connection, I decided then to start on my own. And at the beginning, I thought it would just be me doing a couple of consulting gigs here and there. And through that experience, I was talking with, people in my circle. So former customers, former employees, colleagues, mentors about my business idea. And slowly but surely, this customer of mine, this previous customer of mine, was getting really excited about my vision and decided to join me. So we bring those two perspectives to Talent IQ, right? That consultant, external view, but really how can we operationalize this in an organization in an effective way? So, and now I'm not alone, which is great. It's always nice to have someone to bounce ideas off of, and we very much complement each other very well.
Amazing. Can you just give us a little glance of what Talent IQ really is?
Sure. So Talent IQ, we become an extension of their recruitment teams. So as we know, recruitment is very fluctual, right? Even more so now, it's unpredictable. And so our teams sometimes go from being overwhelmed with all of these needs to having very little, jobs to work on. So that's where talent IQ comes and solves that issue. So the teams can be, when we have those hype spikes, in recruiting, will come in and support the team and be an extension of them. So we work within their tools, within their employer brand. So over time, it makes it so fluent and very easy to partner together. So that's one of the areas that we help our customers. Another thing, which was our first product that we decided to put out, my partner Mode and myself, was even though we had done, so much in our careers in talent acquisition, there was still a blind spot. And that was, we had built great teams, we had great technology, we had, solid employer brands, but yet we still were not seeing the results we needed. And it sort of was this aha moment where, but the hiring managers, how have we been catering to elevating their skills, right? Because ultimately, they're the ones that are defining the need. They're the ones that are evaluating candidates' competencies throughout the process and making ultimately that hiring decision. And we've sort of not equipped them, right, with the proper skills and knowledge and everything they need to do this effectively and intelligently. So our first sort of product that we worked on for a year was a hiring manager training. So we did that, and we've included in that also the biases that show up, at every stage of the game. And from that stem, because there was a lot of engagement during this module when we were talking about biases, so we then partnered with a university here, McGill, to work on a inclusive recruitment best practices. So we also have a training now specifically for that. So that caters to anyone who's involved in the interview process. And then the final sort of pillar of how we help our customers is in anything involving strategy. We're now working on onboarding programs because we feel that's, very important today. We also help companies implement ATSs like yourself. So that's another thing that we can support with. And that's how we been growing.
That is amazing. You mentioned that, because you have a lot of experience into recruitment and talent acquisition, and you work directly with, your clients. So have you seen like a growth or a growing emphasis on, cultural fit rather than, experience fit? Have you seen or talked to, hiring managers? Like, are they like emphasizing onto, people should be cultural fit rather than, having a lot of experience and a lot of skills?
Yeah, there's a lot of shifts that are happening right now. And when I hear cultural fit, I have a guard that goes up because I feel that we think we do this well. And this is where all our biases set in. So here would be my advice to people who are doing this. And yes, it is important to consider. There's no question that a good cultural fit would be important in predicting that person's performance and sense of belonging within our organization. But if you're going to do cultural fit, if you're going to put that into the equation, you need to first define what that is. And many organizations have yet to really sit down and all agree on what is our culture and what does it mean to have someone, how we're going to evaluate that in our recruitment process. And the word cultural fit, again, bothers me. I prefer cultural add, right? Because another mistake we continuously do, and going back to some of the behaviors that we saw in hiring managers is, Needy left the company, she left my team, I want another Needy. So we keep the same people. And we know from research that it's really when we complement each other, when we bring people that add to what we don't already have, it enriches, our ability to serve our customers because we're a reflection of them. So yes, cultural fit is very important, but we have to really do it in a a manner and a reflective way, and really put the right steps in place.
Got it. When we talk about cultural fit, employee experience, comes into picture. Do you think that, the intersection of talent acquisition and employee experience is critical aspect of modern human resources, like in this era? Like, what is your perspective on, how these two intersect?
Yeah, so important, so important. So let me break that down for a second, okay? So what you're talking about is talent acquisition and the employee experience. And this should be one seamless journey for the individual. And right now, there is sort of this kind of breaking point, and then we kind of feel like we're going from a candidate to an employee. But really, it's an evolution. So that's why right now I'm focusing a lot on the onboarding programs and how companies are doing that. But the other reason why it's important today is because in the recent years, there's been so much push around employer brand, right? So companies really taking the step to understand who they are and how are they going to promote their opportunities. What that means for a candidate, what they've been experiencing in the candidate phase is all these promises that organizations are making, right? So it's really important that when they transition to an employee, that continues. And that's not what we're seeing today. I've been doing work in the last few years on onboarding programs, and it actually only 12% of companies are doing this well. So there is a need to do that, because that first period, the first 6 months of a new employee is the most vulnerable of the overall employee experience.
Yeah. So, you said the percentage, like what do you think, like, you've seen the companies doing wrong in this thing? Yeah. What are they doing wrong? Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, is the onboarding in most organizations only begins on day one.
Yeah.
And we really need to start catering to that pre-onboarding phase, right? Again, the market is super hot right now. So let's put ourselves in a candidate's shoes. I accept the job. Yes, I'm all excited. And immediately after, I get anxious because now I have to quit my job. These may be people that I've enjoyed working with. I have to tell my boss. And so there's a lot of emotions that these people are going through. And because the market is so hot, they're going to get counteroffers. They're going to continue to be solicited by the other organizations that they were maybe entertaining at the time. So we have to stay close to this person, right? So that's one of the things that I've seen where it's been lacking. They fall into this kind of, black hole for that period of time. And then all of a sudden, what we're seeing too in the last few years is ghosting on day one. They accepted the job and never showed up. And then companies are wondering why.
Right.
Well, because the others continue, right? But the way I like to look at an onboarding, if I'm evaluating an onboarding program, I'm gonna look at the 5 C's of onboarding. Okay, so the 5 C's of onboarding are compliance. So compliance here is all the paperwork we need to fill out, right? And we have no choice to do that. The second one is communication. And communication is not just, what we're saying, but how are we delivering these important messages? So for instance, are we putting a new employee in a room watching PowerPoints all day? We can't do that. We have to look at different channels, different ways that we can communicate important key messages to our people. The third C is community. In all of the research, it is shown that when people build relationships in the company they work for, because there's no perfect company, there's no perfect boss, right? So there's always going to be things that you're going to go, ooh, I'm not too crazy about that. But if you have established relationships, we're in it together, it's okay, right? So we have to make an effort to create moments for our people to build connection, not only for their immediate team, but across the organization. So that would be the 3C. The 4th C is culture. We've been talking about that a little bit, but again, it's not just telling a new hire, these are our values. And when you look at, I would like to tell everybody who's watching, go check the values of your competitors. I bet you they're the same as yours. few that are still similar. Collaboration, we see the same thing. So what does this mean in your organization? So the first thing I do with my customers when I'm evaluating their onboarding is I'm looking at the whole journey, mapping it out, everything that's happening, and I'm saying, show me where they had a moment to experience collaboration.
Yeah.
And we're kind of looking through and like, oh, yeah, it's always them on their own going through this experience. Exactly. So really important to do that. And the final C is it has to be cool. There has to be things that become memorable. So again, just giving them a water bottle on day one. I mean, we think that's cool. We gave them a t-shirt. I put a balloon on their desk. I'm not saying don't do that, but we really need to think what's going to get them to finish their day and go home and say, oh my God, that was really great, So, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. That answers it. So, also, it is actually about, finding the right people. Like, speaking of which, when we consider the selection process, like what does an ideal process, looks like when we evaluate a candidate? Maybe we can speak about a smaller team rather than, big companies or MNCs.
I actually think the same would apply, whether it's for a small team or a bigger team. I think the first step is really taking a step back when this opportunity, this job becomes open, to question ourselves instead of going into automatic, right? Oh, here's the job description. I want this again. Our businesses are evolving so quickly. So it is important to take a step back and think, okay, where does this job fit today on my team? Right? Where is it going in the next few years? Does this still reflect my needs? Is there something evolving? You have an opportunity to shape the future of your team. So that's really important, and not to rush that step. The other thing I would say when you're evaluating your need that you need to consider that we often overlook is we often think only about the needs for the position, right? So looking at what the responsibilities are for this person and then translating that into competencies. But what other competencies do you have on the team? So sometimes an exercise that I do is I just take a sheet, and I look at all the competencies that are needed for that team with the hiring manager. And then we do the team across. And then we notice that everybody has the same skill set.
Yeah.
And this is an opportunity to add, going back to the cultural fit, cultural add, same thing, skill add, right? So what is missing on our team? And that should become our must-have. That's what helps us differentiate also our must-haves from our nice-to-haves, which often we struggle with. So that would be my first advice. My second advice, I've been recruiting for 25 years. I still do structured interviews. I don't know why people think that they are good at interviewing just because they do it over and over again. So I tell people when it comes to interviews, practice does not make perfect. You're actually reinforcing bad behaviors, right? And the truth of the matter is, a structured interview is twice as effective as an unstructured interview. So you really need to think about the questions you're going to ask, the competencies you're looking for, and build that in to the conversation. What I hear most of people not wanting to do that, the resistance that they have, is they want it to flow like a conversation, And I get that. You want to make a connection with the candidate. I understand that, but I think candidates really appreciate when they see that you have a thoughtful approach. I always think of it, imagine going to an interview and having a lovely conversation, but feeling that they really didn't get a sense for my experience, the skills, my motivations, or any of that. And then they reject me. I don't feel good about that. I feel, what are they making the decision on whether they like me or not? So we really need to build that in and be rigorous around that, because biases are there and they show up, and we're oblivious to that. The last thing I would say in making sure you have a well thought out interview process, right? So what I see sometimes is candidates have the same conversation over and over with the same people because we keep asking the same questions. And so each step of your process needs to have a purpose. So I always challenge people, why does this person need to meet this candidate? Well, I want to get their opinion. Their opinion on what? Whether they like them? No. We've already, done this. So what would be the purpose? And if we can't figure out, then it's an unnecessary step. So making sure that each step is building on itself as much for us to be able to make an enlightened decision on whether or not this person is the right person for the job, the team, the business, but also catering to what this individual need to see and experience to be able to make the right decision. Because when we both make this decision together, that's when we make sustainable hires.
Got it. You mentioned structured interview. So, like, in your opinion, like, should the questions be each question be similar for every candidate, or it can differ? Like, I think it should be, yeah.
Yes. There's no question that, okay, so you start off with your interview guide and you have the questions and you ask every question, pretty much every candidate, the same questions. Now, based on your answer, I may probe and ask you a further question that I may not have asked another one. But from the beginning, everybody is on the same playing field. That's what we need to accomplish in an interview process, right? So we can evaluate each candidate fairly.
Yeah. Also, I think that should be the first thing that, the hiring manager, that the training that you provide the hiring manager should include. I think it must include that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And today, honestly, with ChatGPT and AI, just say, what are the skills? And you have an interview guide in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So
got it. Got it. Also, when we talk about hiring and recruitment, like what are some nuances in the recruitment process that are often underestimated, but hold significant importance in your perspective?
Well, I think we just talked about it. Honestly, it's the need to really take the moment to understand the need at the beginning, the structured interviews, and I think we often rush into things without having that thoughtful approach. And we underestimate the importance of it. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else I would add to that.
Got it. In one of your posts, you mentioned that about the recognition of talent acquisition, like people like us. So do you still believe that, talent acquisition does not receive the kind of recognition it should?
In some organizations, unfortunately, yes. And some others, it's a different world. And because I've seen this contrast where talent acquisition is highly valued, the results in terms of retention, in terms of, time to fill, and all these other things that we measure ourselves against are exponentially higher. And the satisfaction of hiring managers and partnering, because that's what happens when talent acquisition is valued in an organization, is we partner. We become a trusted advisor versus taking orders. I don't know any recruiter today that enjoys hiring managers saying to them, just send me the resumes and I'll pick who I want to meet, or that's not our job, is just to move paper around. We really have value to bring to the process. It is a profession that requires, study, science, so I think that's my, like you saw in that post, my mission and how to do that. It's not easy. It's not easy in organizations that already have that culture built in of being perceived that way. It's not just, saying it and it will change. It takes a lot of steps to get to that place. And one of them is hiring manager training.
Okay. So, like, do you know any examples of, you've seen like where, talent acquisition are not really perceived as a valuable member? Have you seen somewhere?
Yeah. I see it a lot. I'm not going to name anybody. Don't worry. I'm not going to call anybody. Yes. And because of that, we see a lot of turnover on the talent acquisition team.
Yeah.
And the talent acquisition team, let's think about it for a second. We are the people who have the responsibility of bringing in talent in the company. What's
Yeah.
more important than that? In my opinion, you know, um, HR caters to once the person's on board and making sure we have the right elements to attract people.
Yeah.
But if we brought the wrong person to begin with, what's
Yeah.
the point, right? So that's why I think we have the most important role in all companies.
Got it.
We say it's with people, then we need to make the real effort and put the right energy and to make sure
Yeah.
we do it properly.
Understood. As as my last question, like, what does the future of recruitment hold in store? Like, what do you think is the future of recruitment?
Yeah, it's hard to say. From this summer to now, I think I've seen things shift completely.
Yeah.
So so I think change is on the rise, and we all have to be very aware and become extremely agile. And tools are available to help us do that. So AI has been present in recruitment since back in 2000s. It started with keyword searches, then the rise of ATSs that were doing job matching for us, bias reduction tools embedded in some systems, AI powered video interviewing, chat bots, like all
Yeah.
this is very present in recruitment. So if you're in recruiting and you're not leveraging AI, you're
Yeah.
very, very late in the game. So, and I just shared an example before, creating interview guides.
Yeah.
You go plug it in, you go. So, and so what I think is how that progression of AI in talent acquisition is going to do is it's going to create the importance and facilitate data-driven decisions.
Yeah.
And many organizations are already looking at data when it comes to recruiting, but it's a process often that we're looking backwards. We're kind of looking at the past, of that data from the past, and we should be having more predictive analytics now so we can make real-time decisions.
Yeah.
So I think that's the future in many cases. The other shift I'm seeing is, we alluded a little bit to that earlier when we were talking about cultural fit, but getting away from evaluating candidates on a more traditional way. Years of experience, education, shifting that to a skill based, and because of the scarcity of talent, that will open up talent pools for us. There's so many people that have transferable skills, atypical profiles, and we need to consider these individuals. And I think combined with the fact that more and more people are wanting to do things, trying something different,
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that's a great thing to take part of. And many people are also looking at slowing down or doing gigs, doing freelance. So, and I've spoken to many and I've worked with many very sophisticated organizations where they've been talking about one holistic talent strategy. But there's still so many that,
Yeah.
don't do this. So when you look at your talent, not only looking at it as permanent full-time hires, and that's talent acquisition, and then everything else that's contractors or freelancers goes through usually procurement. It
Yeah.
should be one holistic, strategy that we approach our workforce planning moving forward, and that will again help us be more agile and go through
Yeah.
these fluctuations with much more ease. We'll have many more options to consider. DEI, I think, also, like, DEI has been a topic, and it's a topic that's near dear to me as well. That's why we've invested in making sure our entire team and our entire approach and practices are all about inclusivity. So if you're not doing that in recruiting,
Yeah.
you need to step up. And it's not just about your marketing campaigns showing, diversity on your teams. It's much more deeper than that. I'll give just one quick example. When you're actually posting your job and you're looking at the qualifications that you're requiring, we know that men apply when they meet 60% of those requirements and women apply when they meet 100%. So if you're looking to attract more women, you can't have a list of competencies. So there's these little things that we can do at each stage, at each phase that will be more inclusive and bring in greater talent. Because one thing I can't stand is people saying, well, I would hire more women, but none of them applied.
Yeah.
There's things we can do for that. So that's no longer an excuse, right? So a couple of more things I would say for the future. I talked about onboarding. And I said to you, I shared earlier, only 12% of companies really have a good onboarding. When I've been doing the research in the last 2 years, and most organizations, what they're doing, I talked about the 5 C's, are only focusing on the compliance one, the strict minimum. And there's so much for the customers that we've worked with where we've brought in a new program. We've seen, an exponential improvement in retention.
Yeah.
And who does not want that? It's very costly to recruit. It's very costly to train. And when we have to do it all over again, it's also creating a burden on our existing teams.
Yeah.
So it's not expecting our recent hires, it's expecting our people who are there, who have seniority, who want to stay, but have the burden of always having to retrain and get to meet new people. So I would say if you haven't taken a look at your onboarding program in a long time, this year you absolutely need to look at that. And the last thing is the personalization. Our workforce is very diverse. We have, every generation in the workforce today.
Yeah.
And so we can't have a one size fits all for everything.
Yeah.
We have personalization in our recruitment as well. Whether it's an hourly employee, it's someone who's virtual versus a hybrid versus in present, so look at all of what we're doing in our practices and thinking through, does this really, where can we personalize? Where can we add that level of personalization to create a greater engagement with our candidates?
That is amazing. Also, you talked about candidates or employees, having multiple skills. I think post COVID or during COVID, there, people were just trying everything, every skill they had. There were a lot of softwares and tools they were using. I think reskilling is something that companies should focus on majorly. I think that's the future of recruitment. That for me, it's like on top. Reskilling is like very important because recruitment is really expensive, as you mentioned.
Yeah. Well, that's actually an excellent point. And I would almost add that to another thing for the future is I don't think companies know the inventory of skills they have in their organization. Right? So they're constantly looking outward for talent. But another retention play is making sure that you are providing every opportunity possible for your team, and let's stop, well, I can't lose this person in this department. No, but if you don't let them go in the organization, we're going to lose them overall. So we need to, take an inventory of what the skills are on our team and share that, and make sure that everyone understands the opportunities that exist internally and provide that mobility that people want, and seek.
I think
so they don't have to go somewhere else to experience it.
I think nowadays compensation or hike is like secondary, and growth is really, really important for this generation, I feel.
We want to keep being stimulated. We want to try new things and have an opportunity to do that. And maybe we won't like it, maybe we won't be good at it, but we had an opportunity to do that. Maybe there's rotations, that we create in an organization where people get, and imagine the wealth that gives, that perspective of that employee who had an opportunity to see what different departments do, and after how they can contribute at such a higher level because they have this global understanding of how we operate, it's a win-win.
Yeah, that is true. So Bridget, this concludes my side, and it was such a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Bridget.